I had just finished packing my bags when I felt the excitement building up inside me. I'd been away for a few months in Paris, studying design and hoping to surprise Caleb. I missed him terribly. The day I left, we had promised each other we'd make it work. It was supposed to be just a temporary separation. I thought of him constantly, his laugh, the way he looked at me when no one else was around. I was coming back early, excited to reunite, to pick up where we left off. My heart raced as I looked at the clock, counting down the minutes before I would see him again. There was something about the anticipation that made everything feel so intense, like the whole world was holding its breath just for me. I had missed him, yes, but there was another part of me, a part I couldn't ignore, that felt a pull that didn't just want to see Caleb again. It was something more, something forbidden. And in the quiet of the airport, that part of me couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to cross a line, just once. I caught myself thinking about it. I thought about Danielle, the church's praise leader, the one who had been on my mind more often than I cared to admit. It had been a slow build-up, starting with simple interactions, conversations at church, small touches that made me feel a strange flutter in my chest. We had never said anything outright, but there was this undeniable connection between us, something that made my breath catch every time she passed by. And as I boarded my flight, I realized it was more than just innocent curiosity. I didn't know how to feel about it, but I knew it was something I couldn't ignore. The night I arrived back in town, I had planned to surprise Caleb, but something told me I should stop by church first. The urge to see Danielle, even just for a moment, had become overwhelming. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront what was happening inside me, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding it. When I arrived, the church was quiet, the glow of the late evening light spilling through the stained glass windows. Inside, the faint sound of the choir's rehearsal echoed through the halls, soft and melodic. I walked down the familiar corridor toward the sound of their voices, the temptation of seeing Danielle just a few steps away. As I turned the corner, I saw him standing by the sound booth, adjusting the microphone, his back to me. He was wearing that simple dress again, the one that made him look like he had stepped straight out of a dream. I felt that familiar pull, the one that had been tugging at my heart ever since I first met him. His head turned slightly, as if sensing my presence. When our eyes met, something shifted between us. It was subtle, but it was there. Something unspoken, something dangerous. "You're back," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, but I could hear the weight behind it. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Yeah, just got in tonight." He smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I missed you. We all missed you." His words were innocent enough, but there was something in his tone, in the way he looked at me, that made my pulse quicken. I tried to keep my composure, but my heart was racing. I knew we were both playing a game, one where neither of us could truly be honest with each other, or with ourselves. "I missed you too," I said, my voice a little too low, a little too intimate. He stepped closer, his hand brushing lightly against mine. The touch was barely there, but it felt like electricity surged through me, sending a wave of heat up my spine. I had to force myself to breathe, to pull back just enough to regain my focus. "I should go," I said, almost to myself, but I couldn't move. My body felt frozen in place, like I was waiting for something, though I wasn't sure what. Danielle didn't let me move. He took another step closer, and this time his hand lingered on my arm. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through me. I felt the walls I had carefully built between us beginning to crumble. "Do you ever wonder?" he asked quietly, his voice low, almost tentative, "if there's more to this than just friendship?" I didn't know how to answer. The words were stuck in my throat. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I thought it might explode. All I could do was nod, barely able to breathe, but the truth hung in the air between us. The truth that neither of us wanted to admit. And then, without a word, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was so soft, so tentative, yet full of urgency. It wasn't quick or reckless, but slow, deliberate, as though he had been thinking about this moment just as much as I had. I pulled away just enough to look at him, my breath shallow. "Danielle," I whispered, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he placed his finger gently on my lips, silencing me. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to say anything." But I did. I needed to say something, anything to stop this from spiraling further. But in that moment, I couldn't. I just stood there, caught between what was right and what I so desperately wanted. And as the choir's music echoed through the halls, I realized there was no turning back. I was already into deep. The kiss still lingered on my lips, a soft echo of something I couldn't quite shake. It wasn't the kind of kiss you forget. No. This one was different. There was an intensity to it, something raw and untamed that I hadn't expected to feel. I stood there in the church hallway, the echo of the choir's rehearsal still floating through the air, blending with the sound of my heartbeat, now louder than the music. My mind was a whirlwind, but my body felt still, frozen. In that single moment where everything changed, I didn't know what to do, how to feel, or even how to act. I had spent so many months away from home, focusing on my studies, convincing myself I was doing this for the right reasons. I had convinced myself I was doing this for Caleb, for us. But somewhere along the way, something inside me had shifted, and I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who felt drawn to the forbidden. Daniel. His name alone caused a stir in my chest. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke, everything about him was magnetic. He wasn't just any man. He was the type of man who had the power to unravel everything I had built: my marriage, my faith, my identity. And yet, there I stood, still reeling from that kiss, unable to look away from him. He seemed so serene, his posture still relaxed as if nothing had happened, but I could see it in her eyes, the same hunger that had been ignited in me. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, that same soft, knowing smile. "You don't have to say anything," he said, his voice almost a calm for my racing heart. "We both know what this is." I shook my head slightly, trying to clear my thoughts. "This wasn't supposed to happen," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "I'm married." Danielle stepped closer, her fingers brushing lightly against my arm. The touch was so subtle, but it sent a jolt of heat through my body. I had been trying to resist this feeling for so long, but now that it was here, I couldn't deny it. I didn't want to. "Marriage doesn't always protect us from what we want," he said softly, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "You think I haven't struggled with this?" I swallowed hard, his words hitting closer to home than I expected. He was right. I had fought this attraction for months, telling myself it was nothing, just a passing thought, a fleeting moment. But I had been lying to myself. "But this isn't just about desire," I said, my voice trembling. It's wrong. You're my friend, my sister in faith. I can't do this to Caleb, to myself." He reached out, his hand gently cupping my cheek, and I didn't pull away. His touch was so soft, so tender, it felt like he was trying to calm the storm inside me. "You don't have to make any decisions now," he whispered. "But don't lie to yourself either. This thing between us, it's not just in your head. It's real." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I wanted to deny it, to tell him that this was all a mistake, that I had to leave, that I needed to fix things with Caleb. But the truth was, there was something in her gaze, something in the way her lips almost beckoned me that made it impossible to ignore. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, trying to push down the emotions that were threatening to break free. When I opened my eyes, he was still there, his presence magnetic, pulling me in even further. "I'm not like this," I whispered, but it sounded weak, even to me. I've never thought like this before." Danielle's gaze softened, and he took a step back, his fingers slipping away from my cheek. "I'm not asking you to change. I'm not asking you to make a choice right now. But I know what I want, and I think you do too." My heart raced, and my mind screamed for me to stop this, to walk away, to be strong, to not betray Caleb. But the reality of what was happening, the undeniable connection between us, made it almost impossible to resist. I stepped back, trying to find some semblance of control. "I need to think," I said, my voice shaky. "I need to go home." Danielle nodded, a small smile on his lips as if she understood. "Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway, the air between us thick with the promise of something more. As I made my way back to the car, my mind was a storm of emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about what had just happened and what it meant. I loved Caleb. I did. But Danielle, he had unlocked something inside me that I wasn't sure I could ever close again. The drive home felt like it took hours, but in reality, it was only a short 15-minute trip. The streets blurred past me, but I couldn't focus on anything but Danielle's face, the way his eyes held me, how his lips felt against mine, and how, for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not just as someone's wife, but as myself. I pulled into the driveway, the familiar comfort of home greeting me, but it felt different now. The weight of the kiss, of what had transpired at church, was still on my lips. Caleb was home, waiting for me, just as I had planned. The excitement I had felt earlier about surprising him now seemed trivial. He was sitting on the couch when I walked in, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. He stood up quickly, his arms open wide, and for a moment, I wanted to melt into him, to forget everything that had happened in the church hallway. "I missed you," he said, pulling me into a tight embrace. His warmth was comforting, but it felt distant, like I was in someone else's life, someone else's body. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. I was already slipping away from him, already lost in a place I didn't want to be. "I missed you too," I murmured, but the words felt hollow as I forced a smile. Caleb pulled back slightly, his eyes soft and affectionate, as if he had no idea the storm raging inside me. "You okay? You look a little distracted." I nodded quickly, not trusting myself to speak. The guilt was already weighing on me, but I couldn't show it. Not yet. Not when everything was so uncertain. "Just tired," I said, slipping off my jacket and heading toward the kitchen. The moment I stepped away from him, I felt the distance between us grow even larger. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual even. I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross. I had kissed another man, felt the weight of her body against mine, the heat, the desire, and I had let it happen. I busied myself in the kitchen, putting away my things, trying to shake the thoughts of Danielle, of the kiss, of the growing attraction I couldn't deny. I was trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that I was walking a dangerous path, but I couldn't, not anymore. Caleb's voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to the present. "Hey, I was thinking about us this weekend. Maybe we could get away for a couple of days. Just the two of us. A little getaway like we used to." His words were kind, and I could hear the genuine desire in his voice. But the words didn't reach me in the same way anymore. They felt distant, like they were coming from someone else. "Yeah, that sounds nice," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We can talk about it more tomorrow." I couldn't meet his eyes. I was afraid if I did, the floodgates would open, and I wouldn't be able to hold it together. The evening passed in a blur. Caleb was affectionate, as usual, his hands on my back, his soft words, his kisses goodnight, but it all felt like it was happening to someone else. When I finally slipped into bed, my back to him, I couldn't stop the thoughts from swirling in my mind. Danielle, the church, that kiss. I could still taste his on my lips, feel the warmth of his touch, and the rush of emotions I had never expected to feel. He had shaken something inside me, and now I wasn't sure what was left. In the quiet, I heard Caleb's slow breathing beside me. His warmth, once comforting, felt like a chain pulling me back into a life I wasn't sure I belonged to anymore. The next few days passed in a haze of conflicting emotions. Caleb's affection never wavered. He was still the same man I had married, the one who loved me and supported me. But as we went through our routine dinners, shared glances, laughter over coffee in the mornings, the tension between what I had felt with Danielle and what I had with Caleb became unbearable. I couldn't escape it. I'd catch myself staring off, my mind replaying the kiss, those fleeting moments when everything felt right, but it wasn't supposed to feel right. It was wrong. I knew it, and yet, I couldn't shake it. One night, I stayed late at church, helping with the preparation for a youth event. It wasn't unusual for me to stay behind. Caleb was at home, and I needed to work, to distract myself from the thoughts of Danielle. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I wasn't just staying for the youth event. I was hoping to see her again. The church was almost empty when I arrived, the echo of my footsteps in the hallways amplifying the emptiness. I moved to the sound booth, where the lights flickered faintly. Danielle wasn't there yet, but I could feel his presence in the air. It was like a force I couldn't deny. When he finally arrived, my heart skipped. He walked through the door, his presence like a magnetic pull. His eyes met mine, and for a second, everything else seemed to fade away. There were no words between us, just the connection that had been building since that first kiss. "You're here," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. Her gaze was intense, as if he had been waiting for this moment just as much as I had. I nodded, unable to find words. I felt this strange mix of guilt and anticipation, the internal war playing out in every fiber of my being. I had some things to finish up. I managed, my voice tight, betraying the chaos inside. He stepped closer, his presence too much to ignore. My pulse raced, and I could feel the heat rising between us. Without saying anything else, he reached for my hand, the simple touch sending a jolt through me. I couldn't stop myself from pulling his closer. "Danielle," I whispered, trying to gather my thoughts, but his lips found mine before I could finish the sentence. It wasn't a soft kiss this time. It was urgent, as though neither of us could deny what had been building. The kiss deepened quickly, and I felt my resolve slipping away with each second. I pulled back, breathless, my hands trembling. "We can't do this," I said, though a part of me didn't believe it. The other part, the part that had been consumed by this attraction, was already screaming at me to stop pretending. Danielle's eyes were dark with desire, but there was something more in them, something vulnerable, like he was just as lost in this as I was. "You want this too," he whispered. "I know you do." I couldn't argue with her. He was right. I didn't want this, but I did. I stepped away, trying to regain some sense of control. My chest was tight, and my hands were shaking. "I'm married. I can't betray Caleb like this." Danielle took a step closer, his voice low and almost soothing. "I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm asking you to be honest with yourself." His words hit harder than I expected. I was lying to myself, wasn't I? I had been pretending, trying to force myself to fit into a life that didn't feel whole anymore. The church was silent around us, the faint sounds of distant voices coming from the youth event, but it felt like we were in our own world. "I don't know what this is, but I can't walk away," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt like a confession, but it was the truth. "I don't know how to stop this." Danielle stepped even closer, his hand brushing against my cheek. I closed my eyes, unable to fight the pull anymore. "You don't have to stop it," he said, his voice thick with meaning. "You just have to choose. What do you want?" His words lingered in the air between us, and for a moment, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me. I loved Caleb. I did. But with Danielle, it was different. It was dangerous, thrilling, and every part of me screamed that I shouldn't want it, yet I did. I could feel myself leaning closer to her, drawn by the magnetic pull of our desire. It was wrong. It was all wrong. But I couldn't pull away. And then, just like before, I kissed him again. This time, there was no hesitation. There was no stopping myself. My hands were on his, and his were on me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't care about the consequences. I just wanted to feel something real, something that wasn't tangled in guilt and expectations. When we finally pulled apart, I could barely breathe, my chest heaving with both desire and regret. "We shouldn't be doing this," I said, my voice hoarse, but the words didn't feel like mine anymore. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But he just smiled, a smile that didn't seem to carry any judgment, just understanding. "You're not sorry. You're just afraid." I couldn't argue with him. The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. I tried to focus on Caleb, tried to put the pieces of my life back together, but Danielle's presence lingered in every corner of my mind. I was haunted by his smile, by the softness of his voice, by the memory of our kiss in that dimly lit church hallway. And every time I looked at Caleb, every time I tried to act normal, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Caleb didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. He was the same loving, attentive husband, asking about my day, planning future weekends together. He made sure I knew I was still the center of his world, but I felt like a ghost in it. I wasn't present in the way I used to be. I was there physically, but mentally, my thoughts kept drifting to Danielle, to the way he made me feel alive in a way that had nothing to do with love or affection, but everything to do with something deeper, something more primal. I avoided him as much as I could, but I knew that avoidance was just a temporary solution. Our paths kept crossing, whether at church events or late-night rehearsals. The air between us was thick with unsaid words, with the knowledge that we both knew what we wanted, but were too afraid to speak it out loud. One afternoon, after another strained conversation with Caleb, I found myself driving to church again, the familiar pull irresistible. My mind was already made up. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed to face this head on, to confront what was happening between me and Danielle. I parked in the lot, the silence of the church grounds a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. As I walked toward the building, I could feel my heart racing. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, or even if I was ready to hear what Danielle might say in return. But I had to know. When I stepped into the church, I saw him standing by the piano, his back to me, humming softly to herself. The sight of him made my breath catch in my throat. He looked so serene, so at peace, and yet I knew the tension between us was far from peaceful. He turned as he heard my footsteps, a smile spreading across his face as his eyes locked with mine. There was no hiding what we both knew. It was in the way we looked at each other, in the way our bodies seemed to respond even before we spoke. "You came," he said softly, almost like a question, but there was no surprise in his voice. I nodded, stepping closer. My hands were clammy, and my heart was pounding in my chest. "I couldn't stay away," I admitted. "I need to talk to you." He gestured toward the empty pews, his expression soft, though there was an unmistakable intensity in his eyes. We sat down, the silence between us growing thick. "What is this?" I finally asked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "What's happening between us?" Danielle didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, his gaze searching, as if weighing his words carefully. And then finally he spoke. "I think you already know what's happening," he said gently. "We both do. It's more than just attraction. It's something deeper, something neither of us can ignore anymore." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "But I'm married," I reminded him, though the words felt weak, like a last attempt at holding on to some semblance of what I knew was right. "I can't just walk away from my life, from Caleb." He reached for my hand, his touch gentle, but it sent a shock through me. "You don't have to walk away from him," he said softly. "But you do have to decide what you want. You have to decide if what we have is worth fighting for." His words lingered in the air, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. There it was, the choice, the line I had been walking for weeks. Part of me wanted to run, to turn back and pretend this had never happened. But another part of me, the part that had been drawn to her from the moment I first saw her, knew that wasn't possible anymore. "I don't know what I want," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "But I can't ignore how I feel about you." Danielle's expression softened, and he leaned in, his forehead resting gently against mine. "Then don't." The moment was so fragile, so filled with the weight of everything we had kept buried for so long. We both knew where this was leading, but neither of us could bring ourselves to stop it. And for the first time, in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the guilt that had been suffocating me. I didn't feel the shame I thought would haunt me forever. All I felt was the pull, the connection, the undeniable truth that I couldn't keep denying anymore. Before I could say anything else, he kissed me. It wasn't like the first kiss this time. It was slow, deliberate, and full of need. His lips pressed against mine with a hunger I didn't realize had been growing inside me. I felt myself giving in, my body responding to hers, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. When we finally pulled apart, I felt breathless, my hands trembling. "This is wrong," I whispered, even though I didn't believe it anymore. "But it feels so right." Danielle smiled, his lips still close to mine. Sometimes the things that feel the most wrong are the ones that make us feel most alive. And in that moment, I understood exactly what she meant. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and desire. I couldn't stop thinking about Danielle, about the kiss, about the way everything felt when I was with him. I told myself I would focus on Caleb, on my marriage, but every time I saw him, it felt like I was lying. I wasn't the same person anymore, not after everything that had happened. Danielle and I exchanged a few more glances, quick touches, and even more secretive moments that only deepened the connection between us. There was a part of me that felt guilty for betraying Caleb, but another part, one that I couldn't deny, was craving more of the secrecy, more of the forbidden thrill I felt every time I was near Danielle. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. The way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years, like I was someone new, someone outside of the roles I'd been playing for so long. One evening, after church, I stayed behind to help with the cleanup. Caleb had gone home, and I used the excuse of needing to finish a few things. I didn't tell him the truth, that I wanted to see Danielle again, that I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to be near her, even just for a moment. I found him by the piano again, his fingers gently playing the keys, the sound of the music filling the otherwise quiet room. When he saw me, he didn't smile or speak right away. He just looked at me, as though he had been waiting for me to come to her. "I knew you'd come," he said softly, his voice low and steady. I nodded, my throat tight. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted, the words coming out before I could stop them. I had been lying to myself for so long, and now I couldn't pretend anymore. Danielle stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're not the only one," he whispered, "but we can't keep pretending it's nothing." I wanted to pull away, to walk out of the church and pretend that none of this had happened, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. His fingers brushed my cheek, sending a jolt through me. "I've never wanted anything more," he said softly, his voice full of vulnerability and longing. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me still wanted to hold on to my marriage, to the life I had built with Caleb. But the other part of me, the part that had been pulled toward Danielle from the moment I first saw him, couldn't he ignore what was happening between us. "I shouldn't be doing this," I said, my voice trembling. "But I can't stop." He didn't say anything. He just leaned in, his lips brushing mine again. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling away, just a kiss that felt both inevitable and wrong, but so very right in that moment. When we broke apart, I was breathless. "What are we doing?" I asked, the words filled with confusion and desire. Danielle smiled softly, his hand resting on my shoulder. "We're living in the moment," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "And in this moment, it's just us." I wanted to believe him, to convince myself that this was just a fleeting moment of passion, something that wouldn't affect the life I had with Caleb. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the physical attraction anymore. It was about the connection we shared, the chemistry, the emotions that I couldn't explain. I stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. I was torn between the life I had and the life I was stepping into with Danielle. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Finally, I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared." Danielle's expression softened, and he reached for my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You're not alone in this," he said, his voice gentle but full of emotion. "We're in this together." And in that moment, as I stood in the quiet church with Danielle by my side, I knew I had already made my choice. I had chosen the unknown, the forbidden, and I couldn't take it back. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to face it. The consequences of our actions were waiting for us, waiting to unfold, waiting to change everything. But for now, in this moment, we were together, and nothing else mattered.